She pressed her forehead lightly against the airplane window, watching the sky drift by like an endless canvas of silver and gold. The seatbelt sign glowed faintly above her, the murmur of passengers filled the cabin, and everything felt routine, almost too routine. She was just another passenger, anonymous, nameless in the sea of travelers moving from one city to another. A quiet sigh left her lips. Nothing about this flight seemed destined to be remembered. Until the storm whispered on the horizon. It started as a flicker, lightning in the distance, far off, almost like a dream. She thought nothing of it, until the engines hummed lower and the captain's voice, tight and professional, broke the steady rhythm of the flight. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're adjusting course due to restricted airspace ahead." The words were calm, but something in his tone wasn't. Her eyes shifted back to the window, and that's when she saw them. Two flashes, sharp and precise, cutting through the clouds. F-16 fighter jets. They weren't commercial escorts. They were hunting something, or perhaps fleeing it. Their sleek silhouettes knifed through the sky, contrails streaking in desperate arcs. For a heartbeat, she thought it must be a drill, something staged, something harmless. But then came the sound. Not the hum of engines. Not the quiet thunder of a storm. This was a cry, a scream almost mechanical in its desperation, the F-16s calling for help in their own language of flares and maneuvers. Her heart thudded. Around her, the other passengers shifted uncomfortably, some noticing, some still lost in magazines and headphones. But she couldn't look away. The jets were close now, too close, wings tilting in signals only the trained could understand. A warning, a plea. She caught a glimpse of the pilot through the cockpit glass, just a flash of helmet and visor, and in that instant, she felt it. Fear, not hers, theirs. And then the shadow fell. From above the clouds, it descended, slower, heavier, meaner. The sound wasn't sleek like the F-16s, but guttural, raw, as if the sky itself was groaning under its weight. The A-10 Warthog, ugly to some, invincible to others. It came with a presence that swallowed the air, its massive engines shaking the horizon, its cannon ready, its wings broad and defiant. The F-16s wheeled beneath it like younger brothers crying out for their older sibling, and the answer had come. She gripped the armrest, breath caught in her chest, not out of fear but something stranger, deeper. She had been no one, a shadow on a passenger list, invisible in her anonymity. Yet here she was, witnessing the skies themselves bend into a story larger than her life had ever dared to be. She didn't understand the codes of jets or the choreography of war, but she understood what she was seeing. When the F-16s cried for help, the A-10 answered. And she, just a passenger, was now part of a sky written in thunder. The glass walls of the boardroom glistened with the late evening glow of the city, skyscrapers burning like torches in the night. He sat alone at the end of the long oak table, jacket slung carelessly over the chair, his tie loosened in defeat. He was the kind of man who once believed he could outwork the clock, wrestle time into submission, and still come home with a smile for his daughter. But tonight, like so many nights before, exhaustion won. Papers lay scattered like fallen soldiers around him, contracts, forecasts, half-finished presentations, each one demanding a piece of him he no longer had to give. The glow of his laptop painted his tired face in cold blue. On the screen was not a spreadsheet or an earnings report but something else entirely. A service, part futuristic, part absurd, promising companionship on demand. Order a girlfriend, the ad read in bold letters, as if affection could be summoned like a delivery. He laughed once, a dry sound, more out of disbelief than amusement. Yet his hand hovered over the mouse. Was it desperation or just the emptiness of another long night? He couldn't tell anymore. His finger clicked. Somewhere deep inside, he wished the order was for more than a companion. He wished it was for courage, for peace, for something that could hold the fragments of his life together. A girlfriend, a partner, someone to stand in the silence and say, "I'm here. You don't have to fight alone." The office door creaked softly. Tiny footsteps echoed across the marble floor. He turned, startled, and there she was, his daughter, small and fragile against the vastness of the room. She held her stuffed rabbit by one ear, her hair tangled from sleep, but her eyes were wide awake, curious and steady. She walked up to him without a word, climbed onto his lap, and pointed at the glowing screen. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice innocent but cutting through the weight of his world. Can she start forever? The words froze him. Not can she come, not can she help, but can she start forever? He stared at her, at the way her tiny fingers curled against his shirt, at the way her eyes waited for an answer he didn't know how to give. What could forever mean to a child? Maybe it meant home. Maybe it meant never leaving. Maybe it meant the one thing he could never order with a click. His throat tightened. The advertisements on the screen blurred, suddenly meaningless. What he needed was not a role filled, not a face hired to stand beside him, but a choice, a promise that would echo beyond the boardroom and the skyscrapers and the endless fight for power. His daughter didn't want a girlfriend for hire. She wanted permanence. She wanted someone who wouldn't walk away when the meeting was over or when the storm came. He closed the laptop with a soft click. The city roared outside, but inside the boardroom there was silence, except for the small heartbeat of a child pressed close to his chest, asking for forever. The crowd had gathered before anyone realized history was about to be written. Screens across the city flickered with live feeds, news anchors spoke in hurried tones, and people spilled into streets, necks craned toward the heavens. Somewhere between fear and awe, they waited for the clash, for the answer, for something greater than themselves to unfold above their ordinary lives. She stepped forward into that moment, the woman who had once been just a passenger. The world might not have known her name, but they felt her presence. The tarmac beneath her boots vibrated with the engines of the F-16s, their sleek bodies circling overhead like restless guardians. And then came the rumble, the low, earth-shaking growl of the A-10 Warthog cutting through the sky like a warning carved in thunder. She stood still, the wind tugging at her flight suit, eyes locked on the horizon. The camera zoomed in, broadcasting her image to millions. To some, she looked fragile, too human for the storm of machines that roared above. To others, she looked unshakable, a symbol of something they had long forgotten to believe in. Her silence said what words could not. I am here. I will not turn away. The F-16s dived low, engines screaming, their wings flashing signals. For all their speed and precision, they seemed to flinch, as if they had cried for help and were still waiting for the answer. The A-10 descended behind them, massive and deliberate, a beast that had weathered decades of battles and refused to die. Its cannon whined, the metallic hum of inevitability, and the skies trembled with its defiance. And she, standing below, became the bridge between them, the fragile and the mighty, the desperate and the steadfast. The crowd gasped as the formation shifted. It wasn't just machines maneuvering through air, it was a dance of survival, of trust. The F-16s yielded space, falling into place beside their older, heavier sibling. For the first time, it wasn't about speed or glamour. It was about endurance. It was about answering the call. On the ground, her eyes glistened. She wasn't trained to fly, not in the way the pilots were, but her spirit rose with them. She had been nobody, invisible in the quiet rows of an airplane cabin. Yet here she stood, her image carried on every screen, her resolve felt across every heart watching. The people didn't cheer out of duty. They cheered because they believed. High above, the A-10 unleashed its voice, a sound like the tearing of the sky itself. Not destruction, but protection. Not war, but warning. You will not break us. The crowd erupted, voices lifted as one, and in that swell of noise the world shifted. For the CEO watching from his tower, for the daughter curled against his side, for strangers across continents staring at their glowing screens, it was clear. She was no longer just a passenger. She was the answer, the forever they had all been waiting for.